My name is Rex Hausman. I'm here with Gary Sweeney.
Hi. Hi, Rex.
And we are doing the first recording for a series of interviews. And Gary, I'm going to start with some questions here. We're on section 1. And this is kind of just an intro to who you are as an artist, what influenced you. So, where are you originally from?
I was born and raised in Manhattan Beach, California, and my parents my father was a detective and my mother was a housewife, and we lived near the beach, and my grandmother was a painter, and I had a art-oriented youth where my grandmother taught me about painting, and my parents took me to the LA County Art Museum to see the Ed Kienholz.
Okay, we're recording again.
Okay.
We ended at grandmother.
Oh, okay. My grandmother was a painter. She and my aunt and my parents took me to. They loved art and took me to art galleries and art museums, and I went to see Backseat 38 Dodge by Ed Kienholz at the LA County Museum.
That's that one where he's in that's got that figure in the back seat.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what they were doing in the back seat, but. They didn't explain it to me, but I remember, and we went to in 1964, we drove across the country, we went to the Museum of Modern Art, and I saw the Robert Rauschenberg piece with the Angora Galt and the tire around it, and it had a profound...
Monogram, yeah.
Monogram, it had a profound impact on me when I saw it, as did a lot of the other stuff that I saw.
So basically, you were like birthed in contemporary, kind of the modern art aesthetic, kind of where everything went nuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It wasn't put that way. It was just, it wasn't, my parents were not beatniks or anything. They were strictly middle class, hardworking people. My father came over in the Dust Bowl, and they were actually fairly conservative by today's standards, but they did love art, and they loved... and they exposed me to it at a young age. My sister too. My sister was exposed to it, and we would go to coffee shops, beatnik coffee shops, and look at the art. And we would go to galleries whenever we traveled. So I was exposed to a lot of art when I was young,
and not just classical art, really like modern.
Actually, no, my classical art pre-impressionist came later. You know, that was actually, I had to learn all that stuff in college. The romantics and classicists, I didn't learn until I got into college. It was all pre.
So it was all modern. It was just all the crazy stuff.
Modern and contemporary, yeah.
Where the art world went all right or all wrong, just depending on who you ask.
Right.
So, what were your influences, to become an artist when you realized the greater art conversation? So I guess you were always bathed in the greater art conversation.
Well, I was, but there was never a question. There was never an idea that I was going to be an artist. I was going to be an oceanographer. The conventional wisdom is that art was a great hobby, and a passion, but it just wasn't anything that anyone ever made any money off of. So I took math and science courses in high school, and I was going to, and I surfed all the time, so I knew a lot about the ocean. I was going to be an oceanographer. And then my first year of college, I got in with, smart chemistry students and smart biology students, and they were grading on a curve. So it was clear that I was destined to be an artist after my first year of college, yeah.
Well, if you were going to be an oceanographer, that deals a lot with, like, mapping, doesn't it? I mean, like...
No, it's tides and currents and geography and geology and...
but it's still very analytical.
It's very fascinating. Yeah, but it's left brain stuff. It's not. It wasn't something I was cut out to do. So it's one of those things where you try some things and
you move on.
Well,
if we move on to art,
so okay, I was at a junior college at this time, which I think is a very smart thing to do, and so I started taking art classes, and these were art classes that were technical. They were printmaking and life drawing, and so I took a lot of those classes and learned to draw and paint and design and printmake, And
So like the actual physical properties of rendering images.
well, it was in other words, it was close to an academic training. You had to learn how to do the craft. And then it became time to decide which university I wanted to go to, and my best friend Fred was going to go to Art Center in Los Angeles, which was a high-end, like the best technical school you could have, where photography, it just had these people were guaranteed to have jobs as designers. They went to the movies. These students are the ones that designed the PT Cruiser and the Thunderbird, and these people got jobs in the studios when they got out of Art Center because they made you work at your craft. And then there was, on the other end of the spectrum, was UC Irvine, which was an all-theory school. And by that time, I had a couple of professors at El Camino College that started introducing me to conceptual art, and it really, at first I was very dismissive of it, but then it kind of grew on me, and the more I saw of it, the more I liked it. And so I chose to go to the art theory school. And fortunately, I had a background in drawing and painting, because at UC Irvine, they basically dismissed all that stuff. It was all art theory. And if you didn't have any training in painting,
it was okay.
Yeah, well, not only was okay, but if you didn't have any training, my feeling is that you would miss out on half of what the art experience is. And so, and this was heavy conceptual, post-conceptual, Lawrence Weiner art and language and stuff like that. So the idea of drawing and painting was pretty much poo-pooed. And
was the ceramist there? What was
John
that?
Mason.
Yeah, John Mason.
Yeah, he was doing some amazing stuff. But I never took ceramics. But the printmaker John Paul Jones was there, and he's a legend in the world of printmaking. In fact, I think he got so famous that he, these guys, they would come in, they would get these artists to come in and say what they had to say and leave. So they would get Ed Moses or Craig Kaufman or all the LA artists, all the Billy Al Bankston, Robert Irwin. They all came in and would just say what they have to say and leave. And so you could take the same class over and over again, and they would bring all their friends in, Saul LeWitt and all the. I mean, I just got this incredible education with all these artists, and
really to segue to the next part of the question, which fits right into that. If you're bathed in this kind of conceptual work, more theory driven, do you think that today the work that you liked then still influences you today? So, like, the question is, has the work that you first enjoyed stuck with you, or with age, has your taste changed?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a little bit of each, because, for instance, the first time I saw Dennis Oppenheim's stuff, I was hooked. I just loved it. I loved everything about it, and I continued that affection throughout his whole career. And I always loved his work. And there's probably a couple other artists that are like that, and that I. So but here's the deal. Like, for the first time I saw John Baldessari stuff, I didn't like it at all. And I really didn't like it. And
what was it about it that you didn't like?
Oh, well, I just thought it was dumb, and I really thought it was, I thought it was dumb in the mute sense of the word, and in the dumb sense of the word. And of course, after seeing a lot of his work, I've completely turned around. But
well, you own a couple Baldessaris.
Yeah, I own 3 or 4 of them, and that was. And we used to get to hang out at his studio. He taught at Cal Arts when we were at Irvine, and they were sort of sister schools. But his studio in Santa Monica was always open to students. I mean, he was such a patronizing guy in the good sense of the word. That's why, all those, Mike Kelly, Cindy Sherman, David Sally, all those guys that became hot were his students. Everyone in the 80s that was any good was a student of John Baldessari. He virtually influenced the entire West Coast student body of artists. And
it's almost like Franz West coming out of, I'm blanking. Come on, the concept German.
Oh, huh?
You got one sitting right there.
Joseph Beuys.
Yeah, it's kind of like Joseph Beuys' influence on,
Right.
Anselm Kiefer.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It's like
profound impact.
huge influence.
Yeah, I got a very good education, and I just saw a show at the Brooklyn Museum, at the Bronx Museum last year on West Coast art from the 70s, and it was a trip down memory lane. It was all my professors, it was all my people that I admired. I really liked Terry Allen too. The first time I saw him, he was teaching in Fresno, and still to this day I have a couple of his pieces, and so all of that had an influence on me, and even if I didn't, for instance, Jim Terrell, whose work I don't try to copy at all. It doesn't have any influence on me. But he gave a talk on Marcel Duchamp when he was my professor that like changed my life too.
Interesting.
Yeah, he gave this excellent, and he was kind of he was a very quiet guy, and you never knew, he didn't.
He was Amish.
He didn't talk a lot, but he gave this talk on. He liked to talk about flying. You could talk to him about flying for hours and hours, but he gave a talk on Marcel Duchamp that was excellent. It really.
So, do you think, like in looping back to the question, do you think that this work, when you're in California, you're bathed in like this light of all these people,
right?
Has that stuck with you? Or, I mean, of course it's stuck with you, but has, 30 years later, 40 years later, you still reference it,
Yeah. The other, the one, I didn't mention that Ed Ruscha was also a huge influence on all of us. Even though he didn't teach, he was he was just a badass artist, and he worked with words and language and humor, and so I would have to ask other people, but I think my artwork is strictly based in West Coast tradition of humor, language, irony, things like that. I can't get away from it. I mean, I've lived in Denver and I lived in Texas, but I'll always be a California boy. I don't even, I'm always, and plus I still have my house in California. So I consider myself a Californian, and most other people consider me a Californian, even if they just look at my,
your haircut
hair,
is totally a California.
Yeah, you must be a surfer from California. Well, yeah, I've had the same haircut since I was in the 3rd grade, so it was.
That's great.
That's very good, because I think that.
It tells a lot about who you are with the quirkiness,
I think that the difference might be is that I think when I was in college, it was really, at the time, it was really important to express your ideas real directly. That was the whole conceptual art thing. You had no frills, no decorations,
Get to it.
Lawrence Weiner's words had to be in Helvetica font so that nobody thought they were decorative, and Daniel Buren was the king of that. He did this. He mapped out this whole thing that virtually eliminated all aesthetics from his concept. And I can tell you now that I enjoy artwork that's a lot more enigmatic than that stuff. I mean, nobody wants to get hit in the face by that stuff anymore. Plus, I think that another point is that minimalism in its time was really fascinating, because it was a reaction to pop art and
all the expression, everything going on.
So minimalism was something that I really enjoyed at the time, and and all those Jim Terrell and Eric Orr, all those light, Michael Asher, all those light people, and light and environment, Robert Irwin, all his environments and stuff like that. I actually still enjoy those things, but now when I see somebody making minimalism, it just baffles me. I don't understand. Why would you still do that? Why would you? I mean, we've run that course, I can forgive. People are actually finding new ways to do abstract expressionism, so that still could be new and sharp and
Well, like
fresh
Cicely
and clean.
Brown or
Yeah, that doesn't bother me nearly as much as when I see people doing minimalism, because I think, oh, gee, it's like, okay,
well, there's just so much
seen it
going
bad.
on right now,
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
Mike Kelly's retrospect, and
Yeah.
it seems like everything's slamming together, you know.
Well,
like,
you know what? When I was in my last years of college, we were all lamenting the fact that there were all these different movements that were. I mean, it was really disconcerting to us that there was all these different movements going on at the same time. I think everyone's more comfortable when there's like one movement and everyone's doing that type of artwork. I think then everyone's on the same page, and then and that gets established, and then people move on to other things. But
you couldn't be further from the truth today.
Believe it or not, and it's hard to imagine now, but when I got out of college, everyone was panicked at the thought that there was all these different directions going in art, and I thought, wow, if you thought there was a lot of directions then, you should see that now. But
Well, to close on section 1, I need to ask a very important question. What is your relationship to your dogs?
well, it's not my relationship to my. I have one dog, but it's a relationship to all dogs.
Dogs in
All
general.
dogs. I don't know. They're just. I don't know what it is, and it wasn't. I guess. I
I'm thinking of a piece in particular. Are you a psychopath? So tell us about that piece. You know.
Okay. Well, actually, I've been fascinated with reading about psychopaths and their and how they blend into society, and it's really quite a fascinating study. And but I came upon this passage that among the qualities of psychopaths is that they tend to have dogs and they tend not to have cats, because cats are willful and don't listen to you and just have minds of their own. They can't be controlled, whereas dogs are easily manipulated and they're loved unconditionally, and that's the only way that psychopaths can receive love, is like this unconditional love. So I made an art piece out of it that I was really happy with, and
Well,
in
beyond
fact,
that,
in fact, that was the second art piece I made. The first art piece I made, believe it or not, the cat wasn't cute enough and the dog wasn't cute enough. So I made it and I looked at it and I said, no, I got to do this again. So I made this one with this really cute puppy and this really cute kitty. And I'm continuing that path because I'm doing a piece called Good Psychopath, Bad Psychopath. And because most people think of psychopaths as murders and without conscience and stuff. But also, they found that I think they've determined that maybe 3% of the population is psychopathic, and among CEOs in America, it's double that. It's about 6%.
Kidding me.
No,
control freaks.
It makes perfect sense. They have no conscience. They don't care. They have one goal and one goal only, and that's to make as much money as they can, and it doesn't matter how they do it. So it's perfect about it. If somebody gets in their way or somebody has to be fired or something like that, they have no problem with that. They don't establish bonds with people. They don't establish like relationships with people because they're focused on this one thing, and there's nothing that's going to stop them from getting that. And so it turns out that like psychopaths make really pretty good businessmen. And, I mean, it doesn't say much about for the business community, but anyway, so I found that fascinating. But dogs, I just absolutely, any dog. I mean, we'll be walking down the street, any dog, I'll just come and wrestle with them. I don't know what it is about them. They're just unbelievable. They're just pure joy to me. And amazingly enough, I had a show in India last February, and it was my first trip to India, and my wife and I had to go get shots because there's all these nasty viruses going around.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, just the whole place is like a country full of these viruses, yeah. I mean, you can't drink, for instance, this bottled water. If this bottled water doesn't
click.
Yeah, it doesn't click. You don't drink it because they'll fill it with tap water in a restaurant and they'll even super glue it. So you can't even trust that. But anyway, the first thing this woman said before we get hot, she says you can't touch any dogs. And Janet just looked over at me. She goes, "Did you hear that?" And because I can't resist touching dogs.
So you're just like dejected,
yeah,
like,
I said,
no!
What? What? You just do not touch any dogs in India. I go, wow, that's going to be tough. This is going to
Wear gloves.
It's going to be harder than I thought. Yeah.
Wear a hazmat suit. Well,
Yeah.
that wraps up. Do you have anything else for section 1?
I don't.
Okay. On to
covered it.
section 2.
Okay.
So we're in section 2. Just a sec here. I'm going to go to my notes. There is no radio silence in the radio world. We were just speaking about Marilyn Lanfear, which we may visit a little bit later. A really awesome lady in San Antonio, Texas, a sculptor and storyteller. But now we're on to section 2, art in the public and PBS. So Gary, I'm going to do a start here, and then we'll go into it for section 2. It was said that you had a PBS show. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, let me back up a minute, because I started doing public art, I think my first piece might have been in, wait, I can tell you. It was in 92. And anyway, I was a finalist. When they built the Denver airport, they had a bunch of public art opportunities, and I was a finalist with about 3 or 4 other people. One of them was Barbara Kruger for a piece.
Nice.
And this was going to be a project that was in a gigantic, a very large hallway going to the baggage claim area from the main terminal. And my work had dealt with family vacations and travel and humor. And so I basically, during my interview, I just basically totally oversold myself. I said, look, I'm perfect for this. And
Talk about confidence.
I said, this has everything
This is
you
me.
want. They wanted something that would engage people and take the stress off of waiting for their luggage. So I said, look at my artwork. I'm perfect to, stop the interview.
You don't want a Barbara Kruger going like, you need to travel, like
right.
big red words,
Barbara
security,
Kruger lady doing that. You want me. And it was my first large commission. It really was a turning point. A lot of things happened as a result of that. So I made these I spent 2 years traveling with my wife, not every day, but we drove around. It's a gigantic map of the United States. And on the map are all these unusual tourist attractions and roadside attractions and pieces of outsider art and all this weird stuff that is under the radar. People's,
making the largest ball of string.
Yeah, people's the barbed wire museum and there's a tow truck museum in Tennessee and cookie jar collections and stuff. There's about 350 to 400 of them on these 2 maps, and it's.
So how large are the maps? If you can just kind of describe them for us.
They're about 14 feet tall by about 25 feet long.
So they're huge.
They're huge. They're monsters. Yeah, they're huge. And it was the biggest project I'd had to date, and it was, and I really put everything into it. And then next to it are these family photograph that I took when I was 10 years old of my sister standing next to a meteorite, and it was a black and white picture, and it's a crappy picture, and I hand tinted it, and I blew it up to billboard size, and so my sister's about 12 feet tall, and underneath it says, "My sister Gail on vacation in 1962," and then underneath it says, "Actual size," and she really hated that. So anyway, it's very popular. It's always named the most popular piece of artwork at the Denver airport, and last year they had USA Today had a readers poll on the best artwork in the country, and the Denver airport was named number 1.
Oh, high five, man! Congrats.
And my picture was on the USA Today as the one that's representative of it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it just keeps on giving. It was very
talk about good PR,
yeah,
man.
it was very good PR. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And to tell you the truth, San Francisco has a much better collection of artwork than the Denver airport does. San Francisco has an amazing collection of artwork, but I guess, it was a reader's poll, so...
it's like a people's choice kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a people's choice, yeah. So as a result
But
of
that says a lot. I mean, that means people can relate to it. They don't need to have the whole art history, everything.
They can definitely relate to this art piece. And as a result of that, PBS had me do a show called Sweeney's America that traveled to these places. And we traveled, and I was the host, and we went around, and I didn't realize that each episode cost like $28,000 to do.
Oh my gosh!
And so I did a whole series of those for a couple of years, and they're still being shown every once in a while. And they've tried to get me back to go back and do it, but every time I had to fly back and do voiceovers, and it was it was very time consuming. It was very rewarding and very fun, but it's one of these things I moved on to. So that was and it only showed in the Colorado market, but it was really fun to do.
So really what happened is your artwork happened and then the PBS thing happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but the baseball flags that I make for Red Robin Restaurants.
You have got to be kidding me.
No, they called me up. They said, "We really liked your piece at the airport, and the theme of our restaurant is Americana, and we want you to come up with something Americana-ish for our restaurant." And so I'm on the phone and I'm going, "Okay, baseball flag. I said, "How about if I make an American flag out of baseballs?" They said, "That's a great idea." And so they hung up the phone. I turned to my wife. I said, "I don't know how to make an American flag out of baseball." So of course I got the cheapest balls, and they wouldn't take the dye, and then I had to figure out how many baseballs it would take to look like a baseball flag. So I settled on row of 20 red, and row of 20 white, and row of 20 red, and blue and white. So it took me a month to figure all this stuff out, and I made one, and I shipped it, and I said to Janet, I'm glad that's over with. That was the biggest pain in the ass. I should never have said yes to that. And so they called me up. They said, "Okay, we want 4 more for next month." And this was when Red Robin was only in Oregon and Washington and Canada. And so I made 4 more and shipped them. And the next month they said, "Okay, we want 6 this month." And they did that this was in 1999, and I'm still making them.
You were just making one when I walked in, actually.
I've made 470 of them. Actually, with these, there'll be 483 after I get this order done. And so
to really say the Denver Art Museum was possibly the best career move ever.
The airport.
I mean, the airport.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No. It literally changed my life in so many
still
different
does.
ways. Not only that, it changed my life in a different way too, because once they opened up the airport, I'm a baggage handler for Continental Airlines, and once they opened up the airport, it was so expensive that Continental pulled out of there, and I had to move. And they said, "You can move, and you can transfer anywhere you want, but you can't work here anymore." So to all of us, and so my wife has 2 sisters down here, and so she said, "I'd like to move to San Antonio." So that's how I arrived in San Antonio.
In San Antonio.
So it's just sometimes one thing just changes your whole life.
Well, that'll end Section 2, Public Works Projects and PBS. So we're going to take a little break and then on to Section 3.
Okay.
We're here, Section 3, Rex Hausman and Gary Sweeney, and we're about to talk about the art guys, public art, Jenny Holzer, and other topics pertaining to text within art. So, Gary, we're on Section 3 here. It's the section called References. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the artists John Baldessari and Dennis Oppenheim? Were they important within art, and are they important within art today? And how do they differ from artists like Barbara Kruger or Jenny Holzer? These are all very specific questions dealing with people who deal with both the idea and the concept and with words. So in terms of John Baldessari, when he says, "I won't create any boring art," with a large picture of him above, or Dennis Oppenheim writing on everything from cornfields and in the snow to you could never really put a finger on him, to more quote-unquote serious artwork like Barbara Kruger or Jenny Holzer. Let's go over the first part of the question, which is John Baldessari and Dennis Oppenheim. What are your thoughts on their art then, and what are your thoughts on their art today?
Well, they were both big influences on me, but I think you should also maybe put in Terry Allen there too. Even though his stuff is narrative, I think he was a big influence on me too. His storytelling, but the difference, you have to understand. Before Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer was Lawrence Weiner, and Lawrence Weiner was sort of the godfather of that statement stuff. And I think the obvious difference is that Baldessari and Oppenheim and Terry Allen have artwork that goes with that the text refers to.
There's something visual.
Ed Ruscha's the same way. His stuff isn't just words and ideas, but if you waved around Lawrence Weiner's Little Red Book, then then that stuff, that decorative stuff, is at the time was antithetical to the whole idea of conceptual art. And I think you could put Joseph Kosuth in there, and I think there was a Keith Saunier, there was a whole group of those people that were very dogmatic, but when you're talking about John Baldessari writing, "I will not make any more boring art," his stuff is a tautology. What he's doing is refers to what the words are. So he's illustrating these ideas with humor, and Dennis Oppenheim's the same way. He was illustrating things with humor and using text, and Ed Ruscha and Terry Allen. And so, to tell you the truth, Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer and the people of that school, well, even Jenny Holzer had these beautiful pictures,
True.
these
with the advertising.
the advertising, yeah. So at least there was something to look at, I think you couldn't get any more reductive than Lawrence Weiner's stuff, so you had to go the other direction. But they're very... Barbara and Jenny are very good, and they're very clever and stuff. But it doesn't engage me, and it doesn't humor me, and it doesn't have the same reaction. I hate to say boring, but you look at it and you kind of
got it. Okay,
got it. Yeah, next, and whereas.
Well, with Baldessari, I mean, even when he makes lists, they're funny.
Yeah.
What are the paintings that are at Yale? It's like the instructions on artists.
Right.
Instructions on art or whatever.
Right. Or just even that piece where he's just taking a picture with the palm tree coming out of his head, saying "wrong" on it, or how. Art That Sells, I have a T-shirt. Art That Sells has roosters and stuff, and they've done this whole breakdown.
What is it? Art with more yellow and bright colors sells more than purples and blues. And stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly like that. His stuff is really witty, and I require at least a little bit of that in my work.
Well, it seems like it can breathe. It's like it's not taking it. It's taking itself very seriously.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not too seriously.
Well, when you talk to him, it's hard to imagine him taking himself. He is very evasive when you like talk to him about art. I mean, for instance, I was in a studio with him, and he said, "I don't teach art." He was very adamant about that. He said, "I don't teach art," and he was serious, and I kind of disagree with that. But he does these things. I do a lot of my work for my own self-amusement, and it's a great motivator, and it's almost passive-aggressive behavior to do that, because you kind of go, well, I don't care what you think. I don't care how this fits in with the art world. I don't care how this fits in with art history or how it fits in with the current art trends. I'm just doing this because I wanted to see how it was done, and it gives me a big charge to try this thing. And
I mean,
on the one, on the one hand, it's like I'm completely removing any responsibility on my part to have to explain my work, and I don't think that's right. But
well, Well,
on the other hand,
a
it's
piece
like,
that you say if your metaphors weren't so obvious.
Yeah.
And then there's like this dog barking at a little girl with a Mountie, and it's like, what the hell? Like how?
Oh yeah. Then I went on to make all the most obvious metaphors that I could possibly come up with. I mean, I had a blast doing that. See, that started out. That was a house of cards, and I wanted to do a house of cards. I wanted to do a sculpture that
was this the show at Soladier?
Yeah.
In Denver.
Yeah, I wanted to build a house of cards, and so they were blank boards. I just wanted these, I wanted to see if I could do it, and so then I thought, well, something has to be on the boards, and I thought, I don't want to do cards because that's too friggin' obvious, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to do. I thought of like doing political things, maybe political people, dictators or something. And then I thought, and anyway, anything I came up with was going to be overshadowed by the fact that this is a house of cards. So
and you couldn't read all of them.
Yeah,
or they were,
or it was just going to be obvious that it was going to be a house of cards. So I thought, well. Because it's a metaphor, and it's a very powerful metaphor for things that are tenuous and unstable and stuff like that. So anything I put on there was going to be read like that. So it was driving me crazy, and then I thought, well, shit, I'll just make them all metaphors, and I'll try to come up with the most obvious metaphors I can come up with, like the Titanic, or like a man in a boat in a big body of water, or like. Birds, or anything that was symbolism in literature, in cinema, in anything allegorical, anything like that. So it was fun coming up with this list, and then putting the list of things on
together.
Then putting the two things together. It was a blast. That was really a fun project. And
but don't you think that Baldessari has that same? Oppenheim has that same sense of humor, that same outlook on life. Like, it's the. I've always tried to say that art isn't art. It's literally a thought process. You're literally watching a human being think.
Right.
And that's what makes good art good. You're literally seeing someone's conscious effort as best they can to make sense of this weird world around us.
Right.
So.
But there are people that do paintings, and when they paint, they have 600 years of art history that they have to consider when they're doing that. And so when I paint pictures, it's clear that next to James Cobb, I'm not a painter. And when I do photography, it's clear that next to Rick Hunter, I'm not a photographer.
So this is section 3. My name is Rex Hausman. I'm interviewing San Antonio artist Gary Sweeney. And this is the second part of section 3 where we're going to talk about the art guys in Houston and a little bit about their work and his relationship to the art guys. So Gary, why don't you tell us about the art guys and how you met them and all that stuff?
I think I met them when they had a show here at Blue Star. Not too long after I first moved here. I had heard about them before. Oh, I saw a show of theirs at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Houston. And the first piece I saw of theirs was this suitcase wheel. And I saw that art piece, and I was so pissed off. I was so pissed at myself. I said, that's my piece. That's my piece.
Well,
I should have done that.
And
why? I'm a baggage handler. Why the fuck didn't I think of that? And I've dealt with those suitcases that this particular style of Samsonite has a like a trapezoid shape, and so it made a perfect wheel. And that thing is very well engineered because I helped them install it. But I was so mad at myself for not thinking of that. And they did anyway. They did this work that was just out of this world brilliant as far as I'm concerned. And I met them at a party, and just talked to them briefly. And then we got together for something, and it was like we were triplets separated at birth. We have we have
Same sense of humor.
as close to the same mentality as anybody that I know I've ever met in my life. They are, I mean, it's amazing how similar we are in our outlook and things. And they're very prolific in their performances. People that are prolific, for instance, like Bruce Nauman, every once in a while he misses, every once in a while he hits an atom bomb, but he's so prolific that you just he did a piece at Irvine when I was there that wasn't very successful. And this was when he was in his prime. He'd already had a retrospective at the LA County Museum when he was 31 years old. And a lot of his stuff was just basically Duchamp knockoffs, and I mean, really blatantly, stealing his ideas. And I mean, he did From My Hand to My Mouth, and Marcel Duchamp did With My Tongue in My Cheek. The same materials, the same everything. And but anyway, I had a very close affinity to the art guys. We're best of friends, and I love most of what they do.
What's the story on marrying a tree?
Well, I don't know if that was the most successful piece they've done. In fact, I think that was a piece that wasn't very successful, but ironically, it got them the most publicity. And there was one guy that he was a gay writer in Houston that absolutely sabotaged that whole thing. It was going along fine. Everyone understood, and everyone understood what they were doing. Everyone was familiar with their work. They were their relationship to the Flexus Group and all those strange people over in Europe that were mutilating themselves when I was in college. And but everyone,
a different breed.
But everyone understood except for this one guy, and he chose to make a big deal out of it. And it was a very bad. Your career goes like this, and. Anyway, it was a very bad thing for them, and I don't think that it was. I don't think that it backfired on them. It didn't do what they wanted it to, and I kind of see how, with the dialogue that was going on in social justice circles, I could see where people would have just taken it the wrong way, and so it was just bad. In fact, Toby Camp was the one who instigated the whole thing. He was the one that sponsored them to do that thing at the Manilans, and it was just anyway. They it seemed like that was just a bump in the road in their career. They're off doing other things now.
Well, they're doing their thing. I remember specifically there was an interview with Robert Storr, Toby Camp, and then the art guys in Dallas. And I think there was one other moderator. There was some lady that was very interesting and intelligent. I'm blanking on her name.
Yeah.
But I remember the art guys said something which I personally really liked. I've always been traveling back and forth between New York and here.
Yeah.
And they flat out said, right in front of someone like Robert Storr, I don't give a damn what's happening in New York. This is Texas.
Yeah.
And there was something that was really interesting about that statement.
Yeah.
In front of someone like Robert Storr.
Right.
He is very particularly East Coast, from Chicago, but moved to New York for very specific reasons. And
see, Mike kept insisting this has nothing to do with gay marriage. This has nothing to do with gay marriage. That's the furthest thing from our mind. But at the time, people were saying, well, if they can marry a man, why can't they just marry a tree? Or why can't they just marry a dog or something? And that statement alone completely changed the profile of what they were doing. It was a very common argument among anti-gay people that, well, why if they could do that, why? And so there's these two straight guys who, ironically, have probably had more people think they were a gay couple than anyone else. They were the art guys, and they've been partners for 25 years and stuff like that. And if you didn't know them, you would just have assumed they were
Oh shit! Who are the two British guys? I'm drawing a blank.
George.
Gilbert and George.
Gilbert and George.
Yeah. I have one of their. I have a book signed from them. So I met them anyway. So
Yeah, because on face value,
so I kind of think, Mike, well, you shouldn't have done that. It was. I mean, I love them dearly. They're like brothers to me. But I think they made a mistake in that piece.
well, it's like infamy, So
Yeah, but it's almost not. I don't know if it's a true. They probably got a lot of publicity out of it, but I'm not sure if it's true that all publicity is good publicity. I think in that case, maybe more people know about them now. But what was even more controversial, they had these suits made years ago with sponsors. They got sponsorships.
Yeah.
And Todd Oldham designed these suits and had patches made, and then and they did a great job. They were in Fashion Week in New York, and they wore them for a year, and they were great with it. They were in the New Yorker magazine and all this other cool stuff. And somebody came along and co-opted that idea long after they had done it. And
well, that's almost like
this was like a famous celebrity, and so
that's almost like Sandy Scoggin in Target. Like, have you noticed? Like, Sandy Scoggin was a teacher of mine, and she said that she was in this big lawsuit with Target because a lot of their advertising was direct knockoffs of some of her installations.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, it was like so obvious. Like, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Some advertising guy saw this in a museum and said, that's a great idea, and I'm going to use it,
Yeah.
So
I can see. Yeah. Well, she has a point, and she has a right to do that. But see, whoever knocked off the art guy's idea had really deep pockets, and the art guys did not have the resources to sue them. They were understandably pissed, and in that particular instance, they had every right to, but unfortunately, they weren't in a position where they could fight it, because this guy was just going to. And then people started going, well, it's not a really original idea. Well, it really was an original idea.
Well, speaking of like original ideas and stuff and humor within the museum context, I want to switch to one last piece before we go into section 4, which is Chris Burden's paper airplane machine at the Tate. Are you familiar with this piece?
No.
Well, he created this. I want to see what's your thoughts on this in working with humor and John Baldessari, which is this kind of like, Wild West of art. Let's just go gunslinging and go crazy. Chris Burden was commissioned by the Tate to do a piece, and he made a giant paper airplane machine that constructed and made these little wind-up paper airplanes that would make them go up 3 stories. The machine would go, I think it was like 2 or 3 stories tall, and then it would wind them up and launch them in that huge atrium area.
Yeah.
And it's one piece that I've never forgotten, and I've always thought that just the simplicity, the reference of like Leonardo da Vinci, the history of the airplane, his own personal history with airplanes.
Right.
What are your thoughts about seeing something like that in a museum? I mean,
well, Chris Burden was a grad student at Irvine.
You're kidding me.
No,
I didn't know that.
No, he locked himself in a locker for his MFA.
Yeah, and crawling through glass and all that.
No, yeah, he was locked himself in a locker, and he had a bottle of water here and a empty bottle there, and he was there for a week.
Oh my gosh!
So I have liked some of his work, and I have really disliked some of his work.
His early work is the stuff I don't particularly like, but the later in life,
that's what got him famous, crucifying himself to the Volkswagen and stuff. He got famous for that.
I don't find any of that stuff. Well,
then
anyway,
actually, if you don't like that, you wouldn't like a lot of his mid-career work was Drek and so.
We're on section 3, part 2, and we just finished speaking with Chris Burden, and speaking about Chris Burden, and we're going to close up with finishing comments and then move on to section 4. So, Gary, with any closing comments, you had finished talking about Chris Burden being locked inside of a locker, so I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Okay, that was his master's thesis, and so what I was telling you is that I really dislike a lot of his work, and but every once in a while he does something that I think is really terrific, and which is just disorienting to me. But having something like that in the Tate, number one, it sounds just like a Chris Burden piece. In fact, it sounds like a better Chris Burden piece than a lot of the Chris Burden pieces I've seen. And number two, you're talking about the Tate Museum. This is a museum that gave the Turner Prize to a guy who had a light bulb shining in a room. You know, they're always, the Turner Prize is always the most ridiculous piece of art you've ever heard of. So the Tate is not a stranger to. Didn't they have a big gigantic slide that people could go down?
Yes, that was, and then it was at the Guggenheim too.
Yeah. See, it kind of gets into a realm of art that I really think is trivial, and where you're catering to a public that needs to be entertained, and
That's also very British too.
doesn't have to be. But the Europeans know their art history, and so they're not insulted by. They're knowledgeable people about art. Americans aren't. They just want to be entertained, So by and large, so you would expect better of the British than but Chris Burden did a piece that I thought was brilliant. It was called Samson, and it was this
one of the best pieces ever.
Right. See, stuff like that.
Well, describe it just in case someone has.
Well, it's a device that has that is taken this room, and it's a device that has this beam going across. That's against
two
beams going across against the walls, and it's a device that clicks and tightens it at timed intervals so that it actually pushes the wall out in microscopic increments. And the idea.
Here I am. My name is Rex Hausman. We're on section 4 with Gary Sweeney. We are going to talk about location in San Antonio. We briefly talked about this in section 1, talking about the relocation process of the Sweeneys to San Antonio, Texas. But I think in closing, let's touch on your thoughts in San Antonio. Let's talk about your art collection and any Texas artists you want to talk about that are doing great stuff, or California. And lastly, do you have any advice for anybody who has an MFA, or is leading towards an MFA? So let's start with the first one, which is your thoughts of living in San Antonio.
Well, when I first moved here from Denver in 1994, and Denver was a very insulated art scene. It was, it's 1,500 miles from Kansas City, and it's 1,500 miles. Maybe it's 1,000 miles from Salt Lake City. Anyway, it's very isolated. We didn't get a lot of outside influences. So it was easy. And it had talented artists, but it was very easy just to get almost incestuous, where it was very supportive. Their alternative art scene was very active, but you didn't get a lot of outside stuff. Mm-hmm. And so everyone was doing nice, competent work that wasn't really earth-shattering, and there certainly wasn't anything called the Denver style or anything. And the problem was that I had already received a couple of public art commissions, and I wasn't going to get any more. And the museum had bought a couple of my pieces, and it wasn't going to buy any more. And the 12 collectors in town had all bought my artwork at auctions, so they weren't going to buy any more. So I was lazy, and I was just coasting. And if I had a show, then I might go to the studio and crank out some stuff. But it wasn't as stimulating as it should be. And of course, I got to travel to New York and all the other places to see shows, so I was happy that way. But when I moved down to Texas, ironically, I did a lot of artwork that involved routed wood, and I actually thought I was the only person in the world doing this type of artwork. And so I come down here, and the first show I see is some of Ken Little's things, and he's got these routed hands and this plywood, and it's very good artwork. And then I see a show by Vernon Fisher here, and I see a group show with not only San Antonio artists, but a lot of artists from Dallas and Houston. And I was blown away by the talent. And I came home to Janet and said, I've got to practice. These people are good. I definitely have to step up my game. I'm not, I can't coast here. And so it was a very beneficial move for me. Sometimes you don't know, both times I've moved was against my will. I moved from LA to Denver against my will, but I wanted to keep my airline job. And it turned out to be a very beneficial move. And so I was actually anticipating this move, but I had no idea that the art world here has all these exchanges between other people in Houston. Austin wasn't in the radar at the time, amazingly, but they've since gotten to be a very good art scene. And so you get all these outside influences. And then, of course, Linda Pace came in and single-handedly made San Antonio an international arts center. And so that was her contribution cannot be overstated to the art scene here. It's just her loss was such an immeasurable loss for the art world, but her foundation continues to thrive and go on, and Art Pace and residency and stuff, it continues to bring national and international recognition to us, and for that, we're all thankful, and the other museums seem to be stepping up their game, and so long story short, it was a very beneficial move. I met a lot of very good artists and have been able to try to keep up with them.
Cool. Well, on the next question, it's let's take a tour of your art collection, and I guess what I'll do is snap some photos with my phone,
okay,
if you don't mind.
Okay.
And we'll just take some photos of John Baldessari's, and not what are your favorite, but what do you think is represented in your personal collection?
Well, I think it's like everything in your life. I think these all represent something special to me, or else I wouldn't have bought them. But I started collecting when I was a student. I had a girlfriend that I lived with, and it was an unequal exchange of, I was a student and she was working. So, but for birthdays and anniversaries, I gave her a William Wegman photograph and I bought for $150 when I was a student. I had a Jim Dine lithograph that I bought. I bought when the prices seemed high for me at the time, but these, for instance, these Joseph Beuys pieces were $35 each, and signed Joseph Beuys pieces. So I began collecting as a student and have amassed an impressive, to me, collection. Not only that, but the girlfriend that I broke up with also had a very good collection. She had a Terry Allen print. She has a silkscreen that says "To Gary" from Andy Warhol, and he signed it in front of me for me, and I would give anything. I would give anything to have that back right now, and I think it just got lost to the ages. But anyway, so she had this incredible collection, and I had to start over again, which I have. But my feeling is that you should start collecting artwork when you're young, and you should start collecting people that you believe in, and or trade artwork with people that you believe in and stuff, because you never know. And even the stuff that I have that isn't from blue chip artists, they're from very good artists, and even if the person didn't make it on to fame and success, they have very sentimental values to me, and I bought them because I love the work, and so I'm not saying you should buy these pieces for an investment, but I think you should. I think every artist should be obligated to have a collection.
Absolutely. So, and as we're kind of wrapping up, who are some really great Texas artists that you would say people should look at?
Wow, there's a lot of them. I think here. I think you should look at Chris Sauter's work. I think you should look at Ken Little's work. I think you should look at, I think you should I think you should totally immerse yourself in the art scene wherever you live. You should go to every gallery, every opening. You should schmooze with other artists because you learn so much. I learned more from the people I hung around with in college than I did even from my professors, and my professors were the best artists around. So you have to engage in dialogues with your peers. You have to read everything you can get your hands on, although I don't do that anymore. I'm hopelessly out of the loop when it comes to, artists and current art trends and stuff like that. But that's because it's very exhausting doing that.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job. But if you're going to be an art student, that's part of your obligations. You should know what's going on. And as obnoxious as I think it is, you have to know the current art terms and what's going on, and then filter it all out and decide for yourself what you can use and what you can't use. And you need to dedicate yourself to a life of art and art appreciation.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up our interview with Gary Sweeney. In closing, do you have any advice for MFA students, or really, I don't really want to limit this to MFA students, just people in general that want to know about art, want to see things, want to know what's the big deal with these big white boxes, that are always rotating?
I think you need to. Like I said, I think you need to jump in, and if you commit yourself to the life of an artist, I think that commitment requires a lot of things other than doing artwork. It includes It includes seeing other people's work. It includes reading books. It includes versing yourself in art history and going to museums and knowing where the current trends come from. And
although you may not like them,
right. You find out what you like. You find out what you don't like. And but I think that if the fire is there, then and your energy level stays high, I think that there's a very good chance that you could actually possibly make money doing artwork, or at least make a comfortable living doing art. You might also take my example, and you might realize that you might have to have a job other than as an artist. You might have to have a something to supplement your income, and you can get a job that's involved in the art world, in which case you're immersed in art and you are exposed to it every day. Or B, you could have a job that's totally unrelated to art, in which case you don't get burnt out on art, and you can still, if you're lucky enough like me, you can have a job that allows you to think about your work throughout the course of the day and plan things so that when you get home, you can actually do the artwork. I always, when I interview people, I always ask what their advice to art students is, and that pretty much sums up what they tend to all say. You have to live the commitment and not give up.
Well, I think that's a perfect thing to close on. And my name is Rex Hausman. I'm here with Gary Sweeney, talking about art. Any class thoughts other than be committed?
Hey, no, thanks. This has been a blast. I hope you get something out of it.
We already have. Well, have a great day. Rex Hausman signing.